And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me, as always, is my co-host, Laraib. On this beautiful end of week 17. If this were any other year, 3 years ago, then season will be over. But we have a week 18 next week, including 2 extra playoff spots. So a lot to get into, Laura. But certain things have been locked down. We know who our number one seeds are and who will be getting the buys in both conferences. But there's so much to discuss in between. A lot of playoff spots up for grabs, seeding, crazy matchups, a lot of stuff to get into. So you want to go ahead and talk about anything before we hop into here? First episode of the new year.
Uh, no, let's just go ahead and get right into it. Let's just start off with the Baltimore Ravens dominating the Miami Dolphins and, like you mentioned, clinching the number one seed in the AFC, meaning the playoffs in the AFC run through Baltimore, Lewis. And they've been on an insane run this year. They've had 10 out of their 13 wins. 10 of those wins have been against teams that have an even record or have a winning record, which is absolutely insane. And it's kind of the reason why I feel, and a lot of people feel, Lamar Jackson is going to win MVP. Now, he doesn't have the greatest passing stats. He doesn't have the greatest touchdowns. He doesn't have the most rushing touchdowns, not anything like that. But just the caliber of their wins, the teams they defeated, the 49ers on the road, they dismantled the Dolphins. They dismantled the Seahawks, dismantled the Lions. Just the amount of quality wins they've had this season, Lewis, has been astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Lamar. Like, the counting stats aren't as eye-popping as they were like in 2019, for example, when he won his first MVP. But if you just watch the games and see the command he has over the games and the threat he always poses against opposing defenses, it's like second to none in the entire NFL. It's almost like watching Steph Curry, It's maybe not just what he can do with the ball, but it's the gravity and how he shifts a defense whenever he's on a certain side of the field. That's what makes him so dangerous. And this team, big weekend for football coach with the last name Harbaugh. So John Harbaugh clinching the number one seed. And they had the number one seed a few years ago, Rob. So the only question remains, I think we would both agree, if we had our top 5 teams listed right now, we would probably both have Baltimore at number one. And it feels like that's consensus amongst a lot of people who covers sports. And the question comes, come playoff time, are we going to get the same Lamar Jackson that we've been getting all regular season long? And it feels like he's playing a more sustainable form of football, and his weapons have significantly increased since his last playoff appearance. He's healthy. I wouldn't play him this week. I don't care if he's rusty going into, the divisional playoff game. I say I'd rather have a fully healthy Lamar who's rusty than a dinged up Lamar. So I wouldn't play him this week. I would rest a lot of the big name guys, high profile guys. Go into the bye week, prep for your opponent, most likely Cleveland, if we're being honest, how things might shake out, or some AFC South opponent, and just get ready, because I think Baltimore's in a really good spot. The only question remains, Laura, and I want to see what you think about this, is can Lamar do it come postseason time?
I think this is the year, Lewis. And the big thing that we haven't mentioned yet has been that defense. They've been playing on a historic level, and they've been really covering up any sort of flaws this offense has had, especially think back to that Monday night or Sunday night game against the Jaguars where their offense really struggled. It's where that defense has stepped up, Lewis. And like I mentioned a couple weeks ago, they're on a historic level. I think 7th all-time DVOA. They've just been playing out of their mind. Roquan Smith, one of the greatest additions for this defense from last year, and it's completely just change how they play all across the board. Him locking down the middle of the field really disrupts what a lot of teams try to do. And I think Baltimore has a really good shot this year. And we talk about some of the other teams, like you said, Cleveland. We'll talk about Joe Flacco in a little bit, but how long can he keep up that run? The Chiefs, a little bit of a down year for Patrick Mahomes and that team. The Dolphins, who they just dismantled. The Bills, who've been struggling but been red hot late. I think this is a really good year for the Ravens, and it'll be a disappointment if they don't at least reach the AFC Championship or even the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, big shout out to Mike McDonald, the new defensive coordinator who took over from Wake Martindale this past season. He came from Michigan with Jim Harbaugh, coming back to be with John Harbaugh, and how he's revolutionized this defense, starting with Roquan in the middle. And yeah, you mentioned this is a very well-balanced team. It's just, what do we see come playoff time? That's the biggest concern. But let's go ahead and flip over to the other conference. We had the biggest game of the weekend, the Dallas Lions game, Laraib, in which you were going up against, two top teams in the NFC. Both teams really needed the game. And for seeding purposes, Dallas wins the game, but it's marred by just an awful call at the end of the game on that 2-point conversion. Offensive lineman doesn't, or he does. It looks like he goes and reports that he's an eligible receiver, goes back, catches the 2-point conversion. They flag him for illegal touching. And then you go back, you look at the review and everything, and it's like, it sure does look like he goes and says report. That was an utter and embarrassing whiff by the refs. So what do you think? How bad was that mistake, Rob? And did that cost the Lions the game?
Did that cost the Lions the game? It shouldn't have, because it should have gone to OT after they were backed up so many times, Lewis. And now that's just going to be the Dan Campbell. If you have him as head coach, that's just going to be one of those things he does throughout the year, where he just has a couple of those play calls where you wish, like, come on, man, let's just take the extra point, take it to OT. Because that Lions team, Lewis, in the second half, they completely dominated the Cowboys, to be quite frank. And especially on that last drive to even score the touchdown, they were just playing a different game of football than the Lions were. And so that game would have gone to OT, you really would have liked the Lions' chances. But no, Lewis, that's just atrocious play call. And that's some of the things we've seen so far this season from that same crew against Green Bay versus the Chiefs. They missed that MVS pass interference and a couple other big ones this year. And so they've been ruled out for the playoffs. So is that crew will not be officiating any playoff
Good.
games, but they will be officiating this Saturday once again in the Steelers Ravens game. So that's going to be real fun. But no, as you're saying, that was a huge thing for the seeding. This Lions team that could have been number 2 and had to face a really bad 7th seed in what could be my Seahawks, your Saints, maybe the Atlanta Falcons. A lot of teams that could be there in that bad 7th seed. I think that was a huge call that really unfortunately, didn't go the Lions' way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the call itself was egregious, but I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. That was a 1000% whiff by Dan Campbell and his coaching staff to then you're pushed up to the 7-yard line and you still elect to go for 2 when you were dominating the line of scrimmage. So in that state, but like the red zone passing game was off all game. There was a 4th and goal that was missed. There was things that were just not going your way. You go for overtime. Like, I don't understand the thinking there by Dan Campbell. And that big picture is what scares me about this Lions team going forward. That on one hand, they could beat anybody, but the higher probability that they shoot themselves in the foot because of an unforced error and unforced mistake by either the quarterback or the head coach is much more apparent, and it's going to be more apparent against higher talented quarterbacks and much more talented coaches. So that does scare me about Detroit going forward. I want to flip it up to Dallas very quickly. Another game where they kind of get dominated on the ground. That defense, which was so electric to start the year, the doomsday Dallas defense or whatever, really slowing down recently. And come playoff time, what do teams need to be able to do? They need to be able to run the ball and stop the run. Cowboys can't do either. Tony Pollard is MIA this season. He's just been mid, or honestly below average. And that's not what they expected when they got rid of a guy like Zeke. Zeke was the hardcore, pitch eating guy who was just, he would take the hard hits and Tony Pollard would be change of pace back. And it hasn't worked for them this season. So I worry about how sustainable their formula for success will be come playoff time. But they did secure with the Eagles just catastrophe. It seems like with a win over the Commanders next week that they will secure the 2 seed, which is huge for this team that has had such big road struggles and undefeated at home that they get to at least stay home until the NFC Championship, or if the Niners get knocked off, maybe the Super Bowl. So a lot of stuff going well for the Cowboys, but how sustainable is their path? That is yet to be seen, Laraib.
Yeah, for sure. And then you mentioned how bad their ground game has been. When you face a team like that 49ers in a championship, or even how bad the Eagles are playing, face it, maybe Falcons sneak in, just a lot of different scenarios where you can get grounded and pounded by a lot of these rushing teams.
Even
over there in
the
NFC.
Rams, unlock something with Kyron Williams. And then you have the Lions with Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery. There's a lot of good rushing attacks in the NFC. and we'll see how they're able to defend against him.
Yeah, but flipping over to that offensive side for the Cowboys, Dak and CD look like
Ooh.
they are one of the best duos in the league. As long as they have the ball at the end of the game, there's for sure going to be a chance for them, Lewis. But let's go ahead and move on
Well, not
to.
really if Mike McCarthy's the head coach and has some of the worst end of game play calling I've ever seen in my life. You throw the ball 3 straight times and hold it for 11 seconds with 2 minutes left. I mean, another huge red flag is how awful he is in these big time situations. And we didn't even get to that. That's a huge concern for Dallas. Am I wrong?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you and I have been on the McCarthy hate bandwagon for as long as you've been the head coach over there in Dallas. And so, of course, there can be opportunities for him to mess up. But he's a Super Bowl winning head coach, Lewis. And I think we can put a little bit of
No.
trust in him.
Nope, nope, nope. I'm out. I am out. The fact that you're doing it this late in the season, hell no. I am completely out on Mike McCarthy. If they're not up 13 at the end of every fourth quarter, sayonara, Cowboys. And this is still my pick. I still like the Cowboys to come out of the NFC, but I Mike McCarthy scares me. He really scares me. And I thought he turned over a leaf this season with some of the wins, but the past few weeks, it's the same crap with Mike McCarthy. Come crunch time, come, need to do something. It feels like the first 40 minutes of the game he can coach, and then you take him out and let someone else do. Let Dan Quinn just step in as head coach because I'm tired of it. I'm tired of his hijinks.
Well, Lewis, someone else I know you're tired of is Joe Flacco,
Nice
quarterback.
segue.
He's quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, Lewis, who's we could say has have had a bit of a renaissance, if you will say so. Coming in over 300 yards in every single game he started so far this season, Lewis, and he really looks like he's going to lead this Browns team to a deep playoff run.
Yeah, I mean, the way it's shaking out right now, Laraib, he is playing like the best quarterback in football right now. It's blowing my mind. And we've seen these runs from backup quarterbacks all year long. Josh Dobbs, Jake Browning. And eventually these guys start to find, all right, defenses are planning for you. You can't get away with things like this. But Joe Flacco, it just feels like he's playing with no expectation. He's playing just to have fun out there. He got off the couch. He's letting it rip, letting it loose, low expectation. Well, that's going to end very soon for Joe because then he's going to reach the playoffs, and these throws he's throwing right to defensive backs are going to matter a little bit more. And his teammates are going to be a little more pissed off at him because, you can't get away with some of the throws he's pulling off. Some of them are fantastic. I'm not going to take that away from him. It's wild to see the things he's doing right now. But come playoff time, against good defenses, not the defenses that he's been playing. I severely overestimated that garbage that Robert Saleh threw out there on Thursday Night Football. But I think it's, twilight is coming for Joe. I want to say it here. I'm going to say it with my chest for all the Flacco lovers out there to hear. If you think this is sustainable, you are a clown because and he might ball out next week against the dang Bengals and everyone, or he might not even play. They
Yeah,
might
I believe
rest Joe
they're not
Flacco.
playing a lot of their starters next week.
All right. Well, there you go. Another week for him to get his sleep before 7 o'clock so he's not falling asleep on the sideline. And then come playoff time, when you have to go to a team like Jacksonville, whose defense looked a little sneaky last week,
Okay, now
or go to Houston, who that pass rush looked a little sneaky last
who they
week.
completely dismantled when they played my
Hey,
Texans.
CJ Stroud's the aura difference. A lot of changes aura wise in that building with him there. But I it's a fun story. I think a lot of people are getting a little too ahead of themselves. Big picture, still don't think the Browns are legit.
And I have to completely disagree. Now, you can give me
Good.
all the Joe Flacco, all the yada yada. He's maybe not that great. He's been playing bad defenses. But I think it's that Cleveland Browns defense is what really is the highlight of that team. Myles Garrett looking like the defensive player of the year. I think whenever they go into a deep playoff run, they might have the second best defense over there in the AFC playoffs behind the Ravens. I think they have a really great shot. And if Joe Flacco, now he's had these really great performances, 300 yards in all his games, but if you can just manage the game, Lewis, get the ball to Amari Cooper, get the ball to David Njoku is probably his favorite target since he joined the Cleveland Browns. I think this team has a great shot. Now, they have the fifth seed secure, and so most likely, or they will be playing the fourth seed, whoever wins the AFC South, and I think they have a really good shot in that game.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably still pick Cleveland just because you're right. The strength of this roster and both lines, and this is what Andrew Berry has been trying to build over there, is, with strength within. You beef up those lines. You bring in a Zadarius Smith. You beef up that already stout offensive line. And then you go from there, guys on the outside, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore really making plays. David Njoku has been sparked, which is just Joe Flacco's playing amazing. Don't get me wrong. And I'll give him that every quarterback can have a good stretch. The fact that we haven't seen anything from Deshaun Watson all season, maybe that'll be a separate conversation for another day, but that's a little disparaging for him as a quarterback. And I know it's very disparaging for this Cleveland Browns organization, who has already given them their entire cap space, basically. So come time when it's, these cap hits really start hitting hard, like the Broncos are experiencing, rubber's going to meet the road on Deshaun. And if Joe Flacco makes it to the AFC Championship, or hell, gets him to the Super Bowl, what do you do with Flacco? And I guess we'll get to that bridge whenever we need to cross it, but I don't think we will. But that'll be a very interesting quandary for this Browns organization, because they've done so many great things, but then there's that massive red pimple on their forehead with Deshaun Watson's name on it. So we'll see what they do with that, but that's definitely something to look forward to. Another organization with big questions coming up, Laura, the Chicago Bears, who with the Panthers' loss last week, clinch the number 1 pick in the NFL draft next season, and they have a big decision on their hands. We saw, a lot of college football this year. There's a lot of talent at the top, notably Caleb Williams, who some have been calling a generational prospect at that number 1 spot. But recently, a guy you drafted with the first overall pick not only 3 years ago, Justin Fields, has been playing some pretty good football recently. They've won 4 out of their last 5 games. He's making plays. And Bears fans seem to be really behind Justin Fields. So, Laura, if I promote you to Bears general manager tomorrow, what is your thinking going into this offseason? Let's say that your first round pick falls somewhere around 9, 10, 11. So you have the first round picks, and you have Justin Fields as an asset or as your quarterback. What direction do you think you would take?
Well, Lewis, let's flash back to 1 year ago. And I think we were literally having the same exact conversation about Justin Fields last year. He got off to a really bad start, and then they end the season really hot with Justin Fields, and they back here at this conundrum. Oh, what do we do with Justin Fields? Then we start this year, and those same fans were rooting for Justin Fields these last 4 games, yelling, "We want Justin. We want Justin." We're putting paper bags over their heads earlier on in the season, talking about how bad he was playing, how bad this team was, and now they're saying they want to keep him. If I'm the GM, I trade Justin Fields for a second or third round pick. That's currently what Adam Schefter has been hearing around the league. You have the number 9 pick, number 10 pick. I think you trade Justin Fields and you go out there and you get your generational quarterback, as they say. Now, I'm not a huge college football fan, as you know, Lewis. And every single year I hear the same bull crap coming out of all Mel Kiper and et cetera, et cetera. Oh, this guy is the next Peyton Manning. He is going to be the next Tom Brady. I hear this crap every single year. I heard this about Trevor Lawrence. I heard this about Andrew Luck. I hear this about Zach Wilson. I hear about this every goddamn trash quarterback that comes out of college. But
What
I
if I
think
told you he was
you
the
can't
next
have
Brock
Justin.
Purdy?
You can't have Justin Fields on this team next year, in my opinion.
Laura, I wanted to bring up this conversation because I thought I had this really cool, unique take on it, that they should trade Fields and draft a quarterback. But
Mm-hmm.
apparently that's the prevailing opinion. I agree with you, Laura. I think that Fields in his hot, run right now has been going up against awful defenses. He's completing 59% of his passes. And I mean, the defense has also been playing really good football. That's another story. They're shutting down the awful quarterbacks that they've been playing the entire time. So what am I supposed to be taking away? And you mentioned it from last year as well. It's time to bite the bullet and move on from Justin Fields. And now some people will argue the argument you were starting to make that, oh, every year these guys get hyped up and what happens? A bunch of gabagool. But you've seen from Justin Fields, you've seen something. You've seen that he can be an NFL quarterback. But then again, this offseason, what is it? It's rookie extension time. It's time to make a decision on him come the future. So financially, you're getting a guy on a rookie contract for 4 years, guaranteed. And if the dude's a stud, home run, hallelujah. If he sucks, easy to move on. Might get the GM fired, but that's the situation. And if he's all right, then it's, you get 4 more years as GM at least. So that's your position to be in. But for the success of the organization, it feels like they're going to keep Eberflus at coach because the defense has been playing a lot better the past few weeks. I guess, whatever. I'd much rather have a guy like Caleb with a competent offensive coordinator coming in, but, whatever. And then, yeah, I would say you trade Justin, you use that 11th, 10th pick for a guy like Malik Neighbors, an offensive lineman at that spot, just something to boost up or give him another weapon outside of DJ Moore and Cole Kmet. And all of a sudden, you have a pretty good infrastructure for a team that can compete in a not so sturdy NFC North next season. So I think the decision is to move off of Justin. I think he is a starting quarterback talent in this NFL. I think whether it be the Falcons, whether it be the Patriots, whether it be, hell, even the Saints, I think you make a call on Justin Fields for some value and see what you can get with that. Because I do believe he has NFL starting quarterback talent. Just if you're in the Bears situation, you take Caleb. That's my take. And it seems like we agree.
Yeah, Justin Fields, he can go play for a 7-9 team. He can, take you to 8-9, whatever. But he's never gonna raise the ceiling of your team to someone who can make the playoffs, win a playoff game, win a championship game. He just doesn't have that
But
caliber.
I mean,
So
you can sell it as he's a young athlete who's shown flashes. And if he gets to the right offensive mind, they can sculpt him into this, Lamar, Cam Newton, Russell Wilson type quarterback who could just take over the NFL. But really, it's about where he ends up. I think if a guy like Arthur Smith thinks maybe I can use him as a decoy for Jonnu Smith, then maybe he'll do that. So we'll see what happens there. And, he's from Georgia. That could fit. But it feels like we agree from the Bears organizational perspective, it's time to move off Fields and it's time to seize this opportunity of you've had your pick of the last 2 years quarterbacks and you needed to pick one because you're just missing value at that point. So you need to make a decision. All right, Laraib. So next on up, I wanted to quickly talk about one of the more underreported stories, I feel like, in the NFL. And it's just a drastic decline from this Eagles team over the past 6 weeks. They start the season 10-1. Since then, they are 1-5, sitting at 11-6, going into the last game of the year. And it's just been this defense. They bring in Matt Patricia to take over the defensive coordinator position. And it's just been worse and worse and worse every week, culminating in that awful Cardinals game last week, which the Cardinals looked like the better team. They had a pick six, they had a bunch of dumb Kyler mistakes, and they still dominated. They had 40 minutes of the ball control, just running the ball on the Eagles the entire time. Their defense even looked pretty impressive against, the Eagles guys. So how do you explain the Eagles drop off? And for me, and how much of a threat are they in the NFC?
well, Lewis, when you have good players and bad results from those, that's a directly correlated to bad coaching, in my opinion. When you lose your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator, it just makes it so hard to adjust for the next season when you have all different new guys coming in. And now the past couple of weeks, it kind of looks like they were kind of put themselves in the driver's seat. Oh yeah, we're going to win our division easily. We have to play all these crappy teams. There's no way we can lose, right? And then the reality hits you really fast when you're playing the NFL, and when you think you have all the greatest guys in the whole league, you have defensive rookie of the year and Jalen Carter. Still, it's not enough when you have bad coaching, and now they're in a really tough situation, Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, I had people who picked the Cowboys to win the division and put money on them to cash out because they thought it was such a lock. And now those people are the biggest idiots on planet Earth. Um, um, Anywho, we're talking about Eels. Yeah. So you mentioned it. You lose both the coordinators. We've been talking about this, that it's been this underlying problem. It's like they haven't looked that good, but Jalen's the comeback kid. He'll figure out a way to win the game in the end. And then all of a sudden he can't. And the offense is just losing its identity. Beginning of the year, it was DeAndre Swift who was running the ball. And then it was A.J. Brown, profile passing attack. And recently it's been, how the hell do we convert a third down if it's not 3rd and 1? And it's just so confounding. And it feels like after that 49ers game, Laraib, maybe, I don't want to say it, but have defenses started to figure out Jalen Hurts? Because he has been awful these past 6 games. Quarterback rating average of a 46. I mean, just bad. For even any quarterback standards, let alone an MVP candidate who was leading one of the best teams in the NFL. And Laraib, I'll be honest, I am not scared of this team whatsoever come playoff time. Now, they have the fortunate luxury of going on the road and either playing the crappy Bucks or the crappy Saints, and maybe even the crappy Falcons, who are still in it, believe it or not. So at least, they could maybe beat one of the dregs of the NFL. And then what? Then you get blown out by the 49ers next week. I think the Eagles have a 0% chance of making it to the Super Bowl. There is no shot, the way this team is playing, that they are a viable threat anymore this season, Laraib.
Yeah, even when you mentioned when they have to play somebody from the NFC South, if they have to play the Falcons, who can ground and pound the ball just like the way the Cardinals did this past week, do you really feel confident in Jalen Hurts?
The Cardinals went into Philadelphia and put up like 200 yards rushing. Yeah, you're right.
You really start to lose a lot of confidence in this team, and it's not over yet. If this Giants team in a divisional game says, screw it, we're gonna ruin their season right here, right now, too. Don't give them a chance to even win that division. It's a very
all the
likely
Cowboys need to do
possibility.
is win. No, the Eagles do not control their destiny at all.
Yeah, for sure. But
no, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, if the Giants can just stick it to them too to end the season, why not make them lose a little bit more confidence as well,
Well, if you're the Eagles, I almost wonder if you feel like the Cowboys are going to beat the Commanders, which, Vegas has the Cowboys as 13-point favorites right now.
Historically, this Cowboys team has recently struggled in Washington, if I do say so myself. Dak Prescott has put up some of his worst career games when he's had to play against the Commanders in Washington. So even if there's a 13-point spread, maybe the Commanders have something to say about that.
Oh, don't tip your hand yet, Bucko. But yeah, if you want to pick the Commanders, it'll just be one more knife in my chest this year. But even then, I think the games are going to be happening at the same time. So if the Eagles look at the scoreboard and see 21-3 Dallas, then maybe it's like, all right, Jalen, let's sit the rest of this one out. But we'll see what happens. I have zero faith in them. It sounds like you are in the same boat as me. But hey, prove us wrong, Philly. Make things interesting. Finally, Laraib, there is no Thursday Night Football this week, but I want to talk about some of the clinching scenarios for specific teams come playoff time, because there are still spots up for grabs in both conferences. The most interesting one I want to talk about is Buffalo, right? So Buffalo plays Miami this week in Miami. Tua should play. Miami needs the game. They want to win the division. But Buffalo, I believe, is favored in this game by 3 points. So if Buffalo wins, 3, am I right? Is that what you did? 3? Okay. So if Buffalo wins, they win the division. They clinch the 2 seed in the NFL. And obviously that's huge for Buffalo. They've been a much better home team than a road team this year. And the way they've been playing the last few weeks, they need a gimme at home to start off the playoffs, because they've been playing rough against Bailey Zappi and Easton Stick the last 2 weeks. So maybe they get some momentum by beating up on this broken Miami team. However, if the same Buffalo team shows up that showed up the last 2 weeks and they lose to Miami, and then on Saturday, the Steelers who just beat the Seahawks. The Steelers play the Ravens, who have what to play for at this point. They've already clinched the 1 seed. You don't want to get your guys hurt come playoff time because we know Lamar's health is paramount to to Baltimore's success. So if the Steelers win that game and the Jaguars take care of business against the Titans at home, Buffalo misses the playoffs entirely. So you have a swing from a potential home AFC championship game to a out of the playoffs. You're home next week. That is so insane to me, Laraib, that is a possible scenario. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think well, let's not tip our hand yet, but are there any other clinching scenarios that stick out to you?
No, that's very. I think that's the biggest one currently. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that ever, where it's win and you're 2, or win or lose and you're out. But what I want to focus on, Lewis, is the AFC South. That include my Houston Texans, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and of course the Indianapolis Colts. Now, currently the Colts are at the 7, Texans at the 8, and the Jaguars at the 4. Now, the Colts and Texans play against each other on Saturday, and if the winner of that game will have a guaranteed 7th seed, and the loser will be out. But then the Jacksonville Jaguars have to play Tennessee in Tennessee, Lewis. And this Jaguars team, I know they dismantled the Panthers last week, giving up 0 points. But if there's any chance that Ryan Tannehill or Will Levis can pull off the upset at home against the Jaguars, then the Texans or the Colts could win that division, Lewis.
I know. I mean, that's kind of wild for the Jaguars, who at one point this season were 8-3 and looked like maybe one of the most dangerous teams in the NFL, and now they're fighting for their playoff lives. And it feels like no matter what, the winner of this division, probably going to be a home underdog to the Cleveland Browns, which is just wild for how the season has gone and all the changes to quarterbacks. But I mean, Laraib, who do you think is the best team right now in the AFC South? Do you still think it's the Jaguars? If you just had to pick.
No, I would have to go with my Texans. I mean, CJ Stroud is the best quarterback in that division. That defense played really outstanding last week. I think even without Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and Noah Brown, along with Devin Singletary, make up a good trio of weapons for CJ Stroud. I think that they're going to be the most fun team to watch, Lewis, in my opinion, coming out of that division. And with a rookie head coach, rookie quarterback in the league in the playoffs, that's always great to see.
But we know it's probably going to be the Colts because they have just done stupid stuff all season to force us to care about them. But hey, shout out Shane Steichen. We talked about how big of a loss that was for the Eagles. He is paying dividends for this Colts team right now, and it's huge that they found their guy because it's good when the Colts are good. I just like seeing them around. But I'd rather see them around with Anthony Richardson at quarterback, so I'm excited for next year. But, shout out Gardner Minshew, but I'd rather see CJ Stroud come playoff time. Any other scenarios that stick out to you? I mean, it feels like if the Packers, Packers-Bears is going to be a really big game because the Bears have nothing to play for at this point. Their number 1 pick is locked.
Well, Justin Fields has the job to play
exactly
for with the Bears or not with the Bears for next season.
And what did we see from the Packers last year? A chance to make the playoffs with a win, and they let the young, fun team beat them in their building. And what's happening this year? The same exact scenario could happen if the Bears won it. So that's going to be a very interesting game. And if the Packers lose, all of a sudden you open up the door for Seattle. You open up the door for Minnesota. You open up the door for New Orleans potentially as a wild card team. So a lot of different things can happen in the NFC side. So we'll be paying attention to that all next week, and we'll break down those games in our next episode on Thursday. Laraib, anything you want to say before we head out of here for this first episode of 2024? And we are 1 week away from NFL playoffs.
I think that's the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.